So the first thing I want to go over today is just a quick guide to studying for exam 3. I had a couple of students who, especially on the means worksheet, had trouble figuring out what formula to use, or were telling me they couldn't find a percentage and therefore didn't know how to get their test statistic because they were stuck in the Part 6 notes. And even though it was a worksheet on Part 7, we're looking at Part 6 for help. So I think it's worth reminding you guys that there is that difference between Part 6 and Part 7, and that's basically where I would start breaking down a problem on exam 3, is recognizing which one of those two sections, the lecture notes, the study guides, your cheat sheets, the worksheets, I want to pull out to help me on a particular question on the exam. And telling the difference is really straightforward. If we're in Part 6, you're going to see some mention probably of the word proportion. But the other thing that we might have, which is what students are asking me, they usually give us a percent, right? So that's what you'll see, a proportion, the word proportion, or the word percent, or a percentage given. This lets us know that we are technically in part 6. So this is like 6 versus the other side of things, right? If you see mention of a mean or an average. These are keywords letting you know that we are in Part 7. Now there's more to this. Obviously, you could also look at the underlying variables. This is all stuff I said in that last announcement when I started talking about the keywords that we should be looking for, which is a really good announcement to refer back to as you're trying to translate whether something is an X bar or a mu or a p hat or a p, which is a crucial thing. But this is going to be a categorical variable underneath it all, something that is yes or no. Whether or not a person in a PB bar happens to be a student, that's a yes or a no. Whether or not a college student is a binge drinker, that's a yes or a no. If we're looking at the length of time somebody keeps their car, that's not a categorical variable, that's a quantitative variable, right? Something numeric. And that will be something where we would have the ability to find an average. So that's your first step, determine which part you're in. And then this is where you need to be making your own sort of cheat sheet or quick reference sheet, something to guide you through the exam. There are 4 types of questions as I go through my review. And so you want to have what the keywords are to let you know what each of those types are. So are you in the sampling distribution question? How do you know that? And if you do know that, like, what are the steps to solving that type of question? Are you in a confidence interval question? What are the keywords to let you know that? I think for the most part, they're not subtle. Confidence interval questions will say find or calculate a confidence interval, interpret the confidence interval. It will use those words. Same thing with hypothesis testing. It'll say run the hypothesis test. There are more subtle ways that we could say both of these. Confidence intervals can be referenced with the word if we wanted to estimate something. That usually lets us know we're in confidence interval land. If we want to see if we have evidence, that tells us we're in hypothesis testing land. But you want to have these things sort of broken down, and then your steps associated with each one there on a sheet that you can just quickly refer to. So as an example, this section for the confidence interval, this could go one of 3 ways depending on how you typically do your confidence intervals in this class, right? You could either be making yourself a version of the formula sheet, right? The formula, if that's what you like. So you keep putting this in here, boop, boop. Or you could be a calculator person and you could be reminding yourself that this is one prop z interval. Or if you're into StatCrunch, you could be writing down that this is going to be proportion stats, one sample with summary. Any one of those. And then you probably want to write out the sentence, right? We are 90% confident that the true proportion of context is within, and just make sure that you use the same wording that's in the question. If you try to get a little too creative, sometimes you'll change the meaning without necessarily meaning that. And also read the sentence. at the end of this, the sentence you write should make sense. You shouldn't turn your brain off and write. You should make a sentence that you can actually read and make sense to you, especially you, because you are the one taking this class. So in an example on the mean side of this, we could be doing that t interval plus or minus t star s divided by the square root of n. That's a t interval in the calculator. And I think this one's under t-stats. Same thing, one sample with summary. So that's just a quick breakdown of how I would study, is first sort of making a cheat sheet of the different pieces. You don't need all three of these. You decide which one works for you. I might encourage keeping the formula there just in case, maybe even having a breakdown of what each of these different things are called. The little multiplier there is our critical value. We call this piece here on the end our standard error, because remember, it's not technically a standard deviation. That does not need an S. And then we have a point estimate. So we could sort of break down all the pieces. But as you go through the sample exams, once you have this beautiful sort of reference sheet, you definitely want to make sure that you can tell which of these things you should be using. Run through one where you actually work everything out. But once you've proven to yourself that, like, yes, check, I can do this, you don't need to do 5 of them. You just need to have a decent reference for it and know how to recognize that that's where you are in the exam, so that you're not sitting there spinning your wheels looking for a percent that's not going to be there.